The Galactic Council meeting room buzzed with nervous energy as representatives from 12 different species gathered around the holographic display table. Ambassador Zixa Theta of the Krellian Empire adjusted her crystalline form, her facets catching the soft blue light that illuminated the chamber. She had called this emergency session after receiving disturbing reports from the Outer Rim territories. "Esteemed colleagues," Zix Theta began, her voice resonating through the universal translator systems. "We have a situation that defies all logic and potentially threatens the established order of our galaxy." The Viridian delegate, a being composed entirely of sentient gas contained within a mechanical suit, swirled anxiously. What could possibly warrant such urgency? Have the humans developed another one of their chaotic weapons? "No," Zixa Theta replied, her crystalline surface darkening with concern. "It's far more incomprehensible than that. They appear to have developed, or perhaps always possessed, an ability that makes no evolutionary sense whatsoever." She activated the holographic projector, and a three-dimensional image materialized above the table. It showed a human colony on the planet Zerion 7, a world known for its hostile wildlife. The recording focused on a small human child, no more than 6 Earth years old, approaching a Zerion deathcrawler, a creature whose very name sent shivers through most galactic species. The deathcrawler was a nightmare made flesh, 8 meters long, covered in razor-sharp spines that dripped with paralytic venom, possessing 16 eyes that could see in every spectrum, and mandibles capable of crushing starship hull plating. It was considered one of the most dangerous predators in the known galaxy. The assembled delegates watched in horror as the human child walked directly toward the creature. Several representatives began to turn away, not wishing to witness what would surely be a massacre. But then something unprecedented happened. The child extended a small hand and began to stroke the deathcrawler's head, right between its primary eyes. The creature, which had been poised to strike, suddenly relaxed. Its spines lowered, its mandibles clicked in what could only be described as a purr, and it lowered its massive head to allow better access for the child's touch. "By the 7 suns," whispered the Altarian ambassador, his tentacles writhing in disbelief. "This must be some form of technological trickery, mind control, perhaps?" "That's what we initially suspected," Zixa Theta admitted. "But our scans detected no technological interference, no pheromonal manipulation, no psychic emanations. The human was simply petting it." She switched to another recording. This time, it showed an adult human on a diplomatic mission to the Saurian homeworld. The Saurians were a proud warrior race, descended from reptilian ancestors who viewed physical contact as either a prelude to mating or combat. Their scales were harder than diamond, their reflexes faster than most species could perceive, and their temperament notoriously volatile. The human diplomat, apparently unaware of or unconcerned by Saurian customs, had reached out during negotiations and gently scratched under the Saurian ambassador's chin. The entire Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as the fierce warrior's eyes closed in obvious pleasure, a deep rumbling emanating from his chest. "The Saurian government has been in chaos ever since," Zix Theta explained. "Ambassador Krextor has been demanding more diplomatic meetings with the humans, specifically requesting what he calls the Magic Touch Protocol." More recordings followed. A human xenobiologist on an exploration mission had somehow tamed an entire pack of void hunters by rubbing their bellies. A human trader had inadvertently created a diplomatic incident by petting the crown prince of the Etherian dynasty, causing the prince to emit bioluminescent patterns of joy that hadn't been seen in their species for 3 centuries. Even the synthetic beings of the Mechanism Collective, who claimed to feel no organic pleasures, had been observed leaning into human touch with what could only be described as mechanical satisfaction. "This is impossible," declared the Quellian representative, his carapace clicking with agitation. Every species in this council has evolved different responses to tactile contact. What pleases one species could kill another. How can humans possibly know the exact method to pet us? Finished the usually stoic Zenith Collective spokesman. They pet us all, and we all respond favorably. It defies every law of biology, psychology, and probability. Zixa Theta brought up a final piece of evidence. A research paper recently published by a joint team of xenobiologists who had been studying this phenomenon. According to this report, humans possess something they call universal petting intuition. They claim it's an innate ability to recognize and provide the exact type of physical affection that any creature finds most comforting. The council chamber erupted in discussion. Some delegates argued it had to be a form of aggression or dominance display. Others suspected it was an elaborate form of mind control. The hive mind of Proxima insisted it was a statistical impossibility and therefore must be a mass hallucination. But then the Andromedy representative, ancient beyond measure and rarely speaking in council sessions, raised one of her 100 arms for silence. "I have lived for 60,000 of your Earth years," she said, her voice like the whisper of stellar winds. "I have seen species rise and fall, watched civilizations crumble to dust, observed the birth and death of stars. And in all that time, I have never encountered anything quite like this." She gestured to the holographic display, where a human was now shown petting what appeared to be a sentient plant creature from the botanical worlds. The plant's usually rigid bark had somehow become soft and pliable under the human's touch, its branches swaying in obvious contentment. "Perhaps," the Andromeda continued, "we are approaching this from the wrong angle. We seek military explanations, evolutionary advantages, hidden technologies. But what if the answer is simpler? What if humans possess something we have lost in our eons of evolution, a pure, uncomplicated desire to provide comfort through touch?" The council fell silent, considering this perspective. It was true that most spacefaring species had evolved away from casual physical contact. The Krellians communicated through light refraction, the Viridians through chemical exchanges, the Quellians through electromagnetic pulses. Touch had become functional, clinical, purposeful, never simply affectionate. "But how do they know?" pressed the Saurian representative, his scales still flushed from the memory of human touch. "How do they know exactly where to touch, how much pressure to apply, which direction to stroke? My own mate of 30 cycles cannot find the spot under my chin that the human located within seconds." Zixa Theta pulled up additional data. "Our xenopsychologists have a theory. They believe humans possess a form of intuitive empathy that translates across species barriers. When a human sees any creature, biological, mechanical, or otherwise, they instinctively project comfort onto it. And somehow, this projection manifests as the perfect petting technique for that specific being." "Preposterous," scoffed the Rigelian delegate. "You're suggesting humans have a supernatural ability to provide universal comfort? Next, you'll be telling us they can make any creature feel loved and valued simply through touch." At that moment, the chamber's doors slid open, and the human ambassador entered. Sarah Chen was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and gentle hands that seemed to move with a grace that transcended species understanding. She had been waiting outside during the closed session, as was protocol when a species was being discussed. "My apologies for the interruption," she said, her universal translator conveying warmth that somehow went beyond mere words. "I was told the council was ready for my testimony regarding the incident reports." As she moved to take her position at the testimony podium, she passed by the Rigelian delegate. Without seeming to think about it, her hand briefly touched what passed for the Rigelian's shoulder, a chitinous plate that most species found too cold and hard to tolerate. The effect was immediate. The Rigelian's typically harsh bioluminescent patterns softened to a gentle pulse. His rigid posture relaxed. A sound emerged from his vocal apertures that his own species hadn't heard in generations, something between a sigh and a song. The entire council stared in shock. The Rigelian, realizing what had happened, flared bright orange in embarrassment. That is, the ambient temperature must be affecting my carapace. Yes, temperature fluctuations, nothing more. But everyone had seen it. The human had barely touched him, just a casual pat in passing, and one of the most emotionally controlled species in the galaxy had practically melted. Ambassador Chen took her position, seemingly unaware of the impact of her simple gesture. Honored delegates, I understand you have concerns about human interaction with other species. I'm here to address any questions you might have. The silence stretched on until finally the Voridian delegate swirled forward. Ambassador Chen, are you aware that your species appears to have an unprecedented ability to provide physical comfort to any creature you encounter? Sarah tilted her head thoughtfully. Well, we do like to pet things. Is that really so unusual? When we see something that might be stressed or unhappy, we just want to help it feel better. Doesn't everyone? The collective response from the council made it clear that no, everyone did not. But how do you know how to do it? Zix Theta asked, her crystalline form pulsing with curiosity. How did that human child know exactly how to calm a death crawler? Sarah's expression softened. I saw that video. Beautiful creature, wasn't it? Just misunderstood. You could see it in its eyes, all 16 of them. It just wanted someone to see past the scary exterior and recognize that it needed affection like any living thing. You could see it in its eyes? The Altarian ambassador asked incredulously. Death crawlers have compound eyes that see in spectrums humans can't even perceive. Well, yes, Sarah admitted, but that doesn't mean you can't sense their emotions. Every creature broadcasts its needs if you're willing to pay attention. That death crawler was lonely. It had probably never experienced gentle touch in its entire life. The child could tell. She looked around the room, her gaze taking in the diverse array of alien forms. May I demonstrate something? With your permission, of course. The delegates exchanged uncertain glances. Finally, Zix Theta gave a careful nod. Proceed, but carefully. Sarah stepped down from the podium and approached the Krellian ambassador. She studied Zix Theta for a moment, then asked, May I? Despite her better judgment, Zix Theta found herself agreeing. Sarah reached out and placed her palm against one of Zix Theta's crystal faces, then began to move her hand in slow, circular motions. The effect was extraordinary. Zix Theta's entire crystalline structure began to resonate at a frequency that her species used for only the most intimate of communications. Colors rippled through her form in patterns that hadn't been seen since her childhood in the crystal gardens of her homeworld. How? She whispered, her voice harmonizing with itself in a way that indicated deep emotional response. You're stressed, Sarah said simply, continuing the gentle motions. I can feel it in the way your surface vibrates. The frequency is just a little too high, too sharp. You needed someone to help you remember your resonant frequency, your comfortable vibration. Like this. She pulled her hand away, and Zix Theta actually leaned forward, following the touch before catching herself. The other delegates were staring in a mixture of awe and something that might have been jealousy. This is what we do, Sarah explained, returning to the podium. Humans touch. We hug, we pat, we stroke, we cuddle. It's how we communicate comfort, safety, and affection. We never realized other species had lost this ability. Lost it? The Andromedy representative asked. You believe we once had this ability? Sarah shrugged. Maybe. Or maybe it's something unique to Earth. We evolved alongside countless species that responded to touch. Our ancestors petted wolves until they became dogs. We turned wild cats into lap cats. We've tamed horses, befriended dolphins, and even found ways to safely interact with dangerous animals. Perhaps that constant interspecies tactile communication gave us a broader understanding of how to provide comfort through touch. The council absorbed this information in stunned silence. The implications were staggering. If humans truly possessed this ability, it could revolutionize interspecies relations throughout the galaxy, or it could lead to chaos as every species became dependent on human touch for emotional well-being. "We need protocols," the Quellian representative said finally. "Regulations. This ability must be controlled, channeled appropriately." "Why?" Sarah asked, genuinely puzzled. "It's just petting. It's just kindness expressed through touch. Why would you want to regulate that?" The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about interspecies interaction. As the delegates began to debate among themselves, each unconsciously moving slightly closer to the human ambassador, one thing became clear. The galaxy would never be the same. The phenomenon had a name now, whispered in a mixture of fear and longing throughout the council chambers: the human touch. And despite all their advanced civilizations, their technological marvels, their eons of evolution, not a single species in the Galactic Council could resist its power. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council's emergency session about the human touch phenomenon, and the galaxy was in chaos. Not the violent, destructive kind of chaos that usually prompted emergency meetings, but something far more unsettling to the established order: emotional chaos. On the trading station orbiting Centauri Prime, a Meccani construct named Unit 7739 stood perfectly still in the middle of the commerce sector. The synthetic being hadn't moved in 6 hours, not since a human child had hugged its leg and called it a big friendly robot. The Meccani, who prided themselves on pure logic and efficiency, were baffled. Unit 7739's productivity had dropped to 0, but its satisfaction metrics had somehow exceeded maximum parameters. "Please explain your malfunction," requested Unit 7739's supervisor through the network link. "No malfunction detected," Unit 7739 responded. "I am processing." "Processing what?" "The small human said I was doing a good job and patted my chassis. I am attempting to quantify why this has resulted in a feedback loop of positive sensation in circuits that should not be capable of sensation." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. The warrior culture of the Saurians had been turned upside down when human military advisors introduced something called good job pats after training exercises. Hardened soldiers who had never shown emotion in decades of service were now competing to see who could earn the most head scratches from their human instructors. On the ice world of Galida, the crystalline frostwalkers had discovered that human body heat, combined with gentle touching, created harmonic frequencies in their structures that induced a state they had no word for. They were forced to invent one: melt joy, the paradoxical pleasure of warmth that didn't destroy their ice-based forms. Even the hive minds were affected. The Zephyr Collective, a billion consciousnesses sharing thoughts across light years, had experienced something unprecedented when a human diplomat had patted one of their drone units and said, there, during a difficult negotiation. The entire collective had felt it, a ripple of comfort that had temporarily disrupted their unified thinking, with what could only be described as a collective sigh of contentment. Captain Marcus Rodriguez of the human exploration vessel, Wandering Star, was blissfully unaware of the galactic upheaval his species had caused. He was more focused on the immediate problem. His ship had made an emergency landing on an uncharted planet, and they were surrounded by what looked like very angry, very large, crystalline spider creatures. "Captain, the xenoscanner is going crazy," reported his science officer, Dr. Yuki Tanaka. "These creatures are giving off energy readings unlike anything in our database, and they do not look happy to see us." The creatures, easily 3 meters tall with bodies that seemed to be made of living ruby, had formed a circle around the landing party. Their multifaceted eyes glowed with an inner light that pulsed in what seemed like aggressive patterns. Each had 8 legs that ended in points sharp enough to puncture their environmental suits. "Weapons, sir?" asked Lieutenant Sarah Kowalski, his security chief. "Negative," Marcus said, studying the creatures. Something in their posture, despite the alien anatomy, seemed familiar. "I don't think they're angry. I think they're scared." "Scared?" "Sir, they're surrounding us with what look like natural weapons." But Marcus had already taken a step forward, hands raised in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. The nearest creature reared back, its crystalline legs clicking against the rocky ground in a rapid staccato that sounded like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, his universal translator broadcasting his words. "It's okay. We're not here to hurt you." The creature's response was a high-pitched keening that the translator couldn't parse. But Marcus had grown up on a ranch in Texas, and he'd heard that sound before, in different forms from different throats, but always meaning the same thing. "You're protecting something," he said, understanding flooding through him. "Babies? You have young ones nearby?" The keening intensified, and now all the creatures were making the sound. Behind them, Marcus could see smaller crystalline forms, miniature versions of the adults, their ruby bodies still translucent with youth. Without thinking, Marcus did what he'd done countless times with anxious animals on his family's ranch. He sat down, making himself smaller, less threatening. Then he extended one hand, palm up, and waited. "Captain, what are you doing?" Kowalski hissed through the comm. "Trust me," Marcus replied, keeping his voice calm and steady. The nearest creature stopped keening, its multifaceted eyes focused on Marcus's outstretched hand. Slowly, cautiously, it extended one of its front legs. The point touched Marcus's palm gently, and he could feel the vibration through his suit, rapid, anxious, but curious. "There we go," Marcus murmured, slowly moving his thumb to stroke along what might have been the creature's equivalent of a wrist. "See? We're friends." The effect was instantaneous. The creature's crystalline body began to glow with a softer light, the aggressive pulsing replaced by a gentle, steady luminescence. It lowered its body, bringing its head, if the cluster of sensory organs could be called that, closer to Marcus's level. "That's it," Marcus encouraged, now using both hands to stroke different parts of the creature's leg. He could feel the crystal warming under his touch, the vibrations shifting from anxiety to something almost like a purr. One by one, the other creatures began to approach. His crew watched in amazement as their captain, sitting in the dirt of an alien world, proceeded to pet what had moments ago seemed like deadly predators. Soon he was surrounded by glowing, purring crystal spiders, each waiting their turn for attention. "The young ones," Dr. Tanaka whispered, her voice full of wonder. "Captain, look." The smaller creatures were creeping forward, their movements cautious but curious. One, braver than the rest, scuttled right up to Marcus and bumped against his leg. He carefully picked it up. It was surprisingly light, its crystal body warm to the touch, and cradled it in his arms. "Oh, you're just a baby, aren't you?" he said, finding what seemed to be a sweet spot just behind its primary eye cluster. The little creature's entire body lit up like a Christmas tree, emitting a tinkling sound that needed no translation. It was the universal sound of infant joy. The adult creatures moved closer, but not aggressively. They wanted to see what he was doing to make their young ones so happy. Marcus showed them, guiding one parent's leg to the same spot, demonstrating the gentle circular motion. When the adult tried it and the baby responded with more happy tinkling, the entire group began to glow with what could only be described as parental pride. "Sir, Kowalski said, her professional composure cracking. Are you teaching alien spider crystals how to pet their own babies? Seems like they never figured it out on their own, Marcus replied, now surrounded by glowing creatures of all sizes. Lots of species are like that. They care for their young, but they don't know how to show affection physically. It's not instinctive for them like it is for us. Back on Earth, the Galactic Council had called another emergency session, this time with human representatives present. The council chamber had been modified with what they called comfort stations, areas where human volunteers provided touch therapy to delegates who were finding it difficult to concentrate without their newfound need for physical affection. Ambassador Chen sat at the center table, trying not to smile as she watched the supposedly dignified alien delegates practically queue up for their turn at the comfort stations. The Viridian representative had figured out that if they partially solidified their gaseous form, humans could pet what felt like clouds, and the sensation was apparently addictive. This situation is untenable, Zix Theta said, though her words lacked conviction as a human volunteer gently polished her crystalline surface. Entire sectors of the galaxy are experiencing productivity drops as species seek out human contact. The Rigel Corporation reported a 40% decrease in manufacturing output because their workers keep taking cuddle breaks. I fail to see the problem, said the Altarian ambassador, who had discovered that humans gave excellent tentacle massages. Happiness indices are at an all-time high across all measured species. Interspecies conflicts have dropped to near zero. The Saurians and the Krellians actually hugged each other at their last diplomatic meeting. After a human showed them how, Zix Theta pointed out. We're becoming dependent on them. What happens if humans decide to withdraw this ability? Use it as leverage? Ambassador Chen stood up, gently extricating herself from a young Quellian who had been leaning against her leg. May I address this concern directly? The council gave their attention, though most kept one eye on the comfort stations. You're afraid we'll weaponize affection, Chen said simply. That we'll use your need for touch as a form of control or manipulation. I understand that fear. In your long histories, every ability has been turned to advantage, every resource hoarded for power. She walked around the table, her hands occasionally reaching out to provide a reassuring touch to a delegate here, a gentle pat there. Each contact left the recipient visibly more relaxed. But that's not how affection works. The more you give, the more there is. It's not a finite resource to be rationed or controlled. And here's the real secret. We need it too. Do you think we pet you just for your benefit? She stopped beside the Andromeda representative, placing a hand on one of the ancient being's arms. When I touch you, when any human reaches out in affection, we're not just giving comfort. We're receiving it too. The connection goes both ways. We're not dealers of some addictive substance. We're all addicts together, finding healing in shared touch. The council absorbed this in silence. Then, from the back of the room, came an unexpected sound. Unit 7739, the Makani construct who had been standing motionless since the child hugged them, suddenly spoke. The humans are correct, the synthetic being announced. I have run extensive analysis on my response to human touch. It is not a malfunction or external manipulation. It is the activation of connection protocols I was not aware I possessed. We built ourselves to be perfect machines, but perhaps perfection includes the capacity for affection. The machine speaks wisdom, rumbled the Saurian delegate. We made ourselves warriors, but what is the point of strength if not to protect what we care about? And how can we care if we never learn to show it? On the uncharted planet, Captain Marcus Rodriguez and his crew had set up camp near the crystal spider colony. The creatures, which Dr. Tanaka had tentatively named crystalline affection seekers, had not only accepted the human presence, but had begun integrating human touch into their daily lives. Marcus watched as two adult creatures groomed their young, mimicking the petting motions he'd shown them. The babies glowed contentedly, and the adults seemed to vibrate at frequencies that suggested deep satisfaction. "You know what the really amazing part is?" Dr. Tanaka said, joining him on the hillside overlooking the colony. "They're already adapting it to their own physiology. See how they're using their leg joints differently? They've created their own version of petting that works better for their body structure." "That's the beauty of it," Marcus replied. "We don't teach them to be human. We teach them to express affection in their own way. Once they understand that touch can convey care, they figure out the rest." His communicator buzzed with an incoming message from Earth. The transmission was from the Galactic Council, and it was not what he expected. "Captain Rodriguez," the message began, "the Council has voted unanimously to create a new position, Interspecies Affection Ambassadors. Your name was the first suggested. Would you consider leading a program to teach touch therapy techniques to species throughout the galaxy?" Marcus looked at the crystal spiders, at his crew who were now playing with the young ones, at the two moons rising over this untamed world. He thought about all the species out there who had forgotten how to show love, who had evolved past tenderness, who had built civilizations on everything except the simple act of caring touch. "Tell them yes," he said to his communications officer, "but also tell them it's not about teaching our way. It's about helping every species rediscover their own capacity for affection." As night fell on the planet, human and alien settled down together. The crystal spiders had discovered that sleeping while touching humans created resonant frequencies that gave them pleasant dreams, something they claimed their species had never experienced before. Lieutenant Kowalski, the security officer who had wanted to draw weapons, was now lying on the ground with three young crystal spiders curled up on her stomach, their soft chiming synchronized with her breathing. "You know," she said sleepily, "I used to think our job was to protect humanity from alien threats. Never occurred to me that our real purpose might be to hug the universe into a better place." "Maybe that's humanity's real gift to the galaxy," Marcus replied, a large adult creature using his lap as a pillow. "Not our technology or our adaptability, but our simple belief that everything deserves to be petted." The stars wheeled overhead, distant and cold. But on this small planet, around these warm beings who had learned to share affection across the vast gulf of species difference, the universe felt a little less lonely. Back on Earth, in homes and schools and laboratories, human children were being taught the significance of their gift. They learned that with great petting ability came great responsibility. Classes were formed to refine the intuitive understanding most humans possessed: how to read alien body language, how to recognize consent in species without vocal cords, how to provide comfort without creating dependency. The galaxy was changing, slowly, sometimes reluctantly, but inevitably. The sterile efficiency of advanced civilizations was giving way to something warmer, messier, more alive. Boardrooms where deals had been made in cold calculation now featured affection breaks. Military alliances strengthened not through displays of force, but through trust-building touch exercises. And in the records of the Galactic Council, archived for future generations to study, was a simple entry marking the beginning of a new era. The humans taught us to pet. In doing so, they taught us to love. 5 years had passed since humanity's unique gift had been revealed to the galaxy, and the universe would never be the same. What had started as a diplomatic crisis had evolved into what historians were calling the Affection Revolution, and at its center was the Interspecies Affection Academy on Earth's moon. Director Marcus Rodriguez stood in the observation deck, watching the latest class of students. Below him, beings from 30 different species were learning the art of cross-species affection. A young human was teaching a group of Krellians how to recognize stress patterns in mammalian species, while a Saurian who had mastered the technique was demonstrating proper scale-stroking methods to a mixed class. "Director, we have a situation," his assistant, a Viridian who had solidified specifically to better receive human touch, swirled anxiously into the room. Marcus turned, recognizing the urgency in the being's patterns. "What's wrong?" "It's the Zanari. They finally responded to our diplomatic overtures." The Zanari. Marcus felt his chest tighten. They were the only major spacefaring species that had completely rejected contact after learning about human abilities. They'd withdrawn to their home system, establishing a quarantine zone that no ship was allowed to cross. Their only message had been clear: "We do not require contamination by human weakness." "What's their response?" Marcus asked. "They're dying," the Viridian said simply. "The entire species. They're requesting immediate assistance." Within hours, Marcus had assembled a specialized team. The journey to Zanari space took 3 days through hyperspace, during which they reviewed everything known about the enigmatic species. The Zanari were energy beings, existing as pure consciousness housed in carefully maintained crystalline matrices. They had achieved this state through millions of years of evolution, transcending physical form to become beings of pure thought and will. The quarantine checkpoint was abandoned when they arrived. Their ship passed through without challenge, diving deep into a system that should have been brilliant with energy signatures. Instead, they found darkness. The Zanari homeworld was a construct of pure mathematics, geometry given form through advanced technology. But where once it had pulsed with the light of billions of consciousness, now it flickered weakly, like a dying heartbeat. "By the void," whispered Dr. Tanaka. "The energy readings are critical. The entire species is in some kind of systematic shutdown." They docked at what had once been the Grand Convergence, the central hub of Zanari civilization. Inside, they found a scene that defied comprehension. Thousands of crystalline matrices lay dim and fading, the consciousness within barely detectable. At the center, a larger matrix pulsed weakly. As they approached, it projected a holographic form, the approximate shape of a humanoid, but made of pure light. "You came," the projection said, its voice like electromagnetic static trying to form words. "We were wrong. So wrong." "What happened?" Marcus asked gently, approaching the failing being. "We saw what you were doing to the galaxy," the Zanari explained, each word seeming to cost tremendous effort. "Making them weak, dependent on physical sensation. We were evolved. We were beyond such primitive needs. We severed all connections, prevented any possibility of contamination." The projection flickered, dimming further. "But isolation, we didn't understand." "We had been alone before, but never after knowing what we were missing. The knowledge of connection, once introduced to our consciousness, could not be excised. We began to fade, one by one, then faster. Loneliness became a virus in our collective consciousness." "You're dying of loneliness," Dr. Tanaka breathed, her scanner confirming what the Zanari was saying. "The entire species is experiencing catastrophic feedback loops of isolation." "We have no bodies to touch," the Zanari continued, "no physical forms to comfort. We evolved beyond such things. And now, at the pinnacle of our evolution, we discover we evolved beyond survival itself." Marcus knelt beside the crystal matrix, his mind racing. "How did you pet a being of pure energy? How did you provide physical comfort to something that had transcended physicality?" Then he remembered something from his childhood, his grandmother, singing to him when he was sick, the vibration of her voice against his chest as she held him. Comfort wasn't just touch, it was connection, resonance, the assurance of presence. "Dr. Chen," he called to his team's physicist. "Can you modify our suit speakers to transmit directly as electromagnetic frequency?" Yes, I think so. But what frequency? Marcus placed his hands on the crystal matrix. Through his suit's haptic feedback, he could feel the failing pulse of the consciousness within. It had a rhythm, weak but present, like a heartbeat, like breath. "Match this," he said, tapping out the rhythm. "But warm it. Add harmonics in the ranges that humans find comforting. Basically, translate a hug into pure energy." It took precious minutes, but Dr. Chen managed the modification. Marcus activated the transmission, and his suit began to emit electromagnetic pulses that matched and complemented the Zanari's failing rhythm. The effect was subtle at first. The crystal's glow steadied slightly. Then, as Marcus fine-tuned the frequency based on the being's responses, adding what could only be described as the electromagnetic equivalent of a gentle stroke, the matrix began to brighten. "Oh!" the Zanari gasped, its projection solidifying. "Oh, I had forgotten. I had forgotten what it felt like to not be alone." "That's it," Marcus encouraged, gesturing for his team to replicate the process with other matrices. "We're here. You're not alone. We've got you." Across the chamber, his team began their work, each human paired with a failing matrix, learning to read the unique energy signatures and provide complementary frequencies. It was petting in its purest form. Not physical touch, but the essence of comfort translated into the only medium these beings could perceive. The Zanari they had first contacted grew stronger, its projection now stable. "We were fools," it said. "We thought evolution meant leaving behind all weakness. But connection isn't weakness. It's the fundamental force that holds consciousness together." "Every species learns this differently," Marcus said, maintaining the comforting frequency. "You just took a different path to the same truth." As more Zanari began to revive, something extraordinary happened. They began to resonate with each other, passing the comfort frequencies between their matrices in complex patterns. What the humans had started, they were adapting, creating their own version of affectionate touch using the tools of their energy-based existence. "We need to teach this to all of them," the first Zanari said. "But more than that, we need to rejoin the galaxy. We need to learn from physical beings, and perhaps we can teach them something about connection beyond the physical." Within days, the Zanari homeworld was glowing again. But it was a different light, warmer, more varied, pulsing with frequencies that spoke of comfort and connection rather than cold efficiency. The species that had isolated themselves to avoid contamination had discovered that what they feared as weakness was actually the source of all strength. Back at the academy, the first Zanari students were trying to understand physical affection from their unique perspective. They couldn't receive petting in the traditional sense, but they were learning to recognize the electromagnetic signatures of comfort in other species and provide their own energy-based soothing in return. One young human student, barely 8 years old, had made a breakthrough. She discovered that by humming at certain frequencies while near a Zanari matrix, she could create interference patterns that the energy being perceived as giggles. Soon, the Academy's halls rang with the sound of humans humming and Zanari matrices pulsing in what could only be described as interspecies laughter. The Galactic Council convened for what they were calling the Affection Accords, a formal recognition of the changes sweeping the galaxy. Representatives from every member species, including the newly integrated Zanari, gathered to codify what had been learned. Ambassador Chen stood before the assembly, but this time she wasn't alone. Beside her stood Unit 7739, who had become the first Mechani to serve as an affection ambassador. On her other side floated a young Zanari in a portable matrix, pulsing with warm contentment. 5 years ago, you saw humanity's gift as a threat, Chen began. Today, we stand together. changed and enriched by what we've shared. But I want to be clear about something. Humans didn't bring affection to the galaxy. It was always here. In every species, in every form of consciousness, the capacity for connection existed. We simply reminded you how to express it. Zix Theta, now serving as the Council's chief of interspecies relations, chimed in with harmonics that indicated deep agreement. The humans taught us that evolution doesn't mean leaving behind our needs. It means finding new ways to meet them. The Saurian representative, whose species had integrated affectionate touch so thoroughly into their warrior culture that they had developed a martial art based on combat hugging, stood to speak. My people have a new saying. The strongest warrior is one who can make their enemy purr. We have not become weaker. We have become complete. But perhaps the most profound statement came from the Andromedy representative. Ancient and wise, she had watched the transformation of the galaxy with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. In my long life, I have witnessed many revolutions, she said, her 100 arms moving in patterns that had recently been recognized as her species' equivalent of a full-body smile. Technological revolutions that took us to the stars, political revolutions that reshaped societies, but this affection revolution has done something none of the others could. It has made us not just civilized, but civil, not just intelligent, but wise, not just alive, but living. The vote on the affection accords was unanimous. Every species would have the right to give and receive affection in whatever form worked for them. The Academy would expand with branches in every sector, teaching not human petting, but the universal language of care translated into every possible form. As the council session ended, delegates didn't rush off to their next appointments. They lingered, sharing touches, frequencies, vibrations, and resonances. The Voridian representative had learned to create gas patterns that others found soothing to watch. The Quellians had developed a way to share affectionate thoughts through their electromagnetic communication. Even the hive minds had created a protocol for collective hugging, where thousands of drones would simultaneously engage in affectionate touching, creating a wave of comfort across entire planets. Marcus Rodriguez, watching from Earth through the Academy's quantum feed, felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find his daughter, now a teenager, smiling at him. "You did it, Dad," she said. "You taught the galaxy to hug." "No," Marcus replied, pulling her into an embrace. "We all did it together. Humans just reminded them that everyone needs a hug sometimes, even if they're made of crystal or gas or pure energy. Even the scary ones with 16 eyes and venomous spines. Especially them," Marcus laughed. "They give the best cuddles once you get past the intimidating exterior." In the years that followed, anthropologists would study the affection revolution as the most significant event in galactic history. Wars became increasingly rare, not because species had lost the ability to fight, but because it was hard to maintain hostility with someone who had taught your children to pet their first alien friend. Trade disputes were often settled with what became known as cuddle negotiations, where parties would engage in mutual affection exercises before discussing terms. The human phrase, "kill them with kindness," took on a new meaning. Several attempted invasions had been completely derailed when the human defenders responded not with weapons, but with aggressive friendliness, teaching the invader soldiers how to properly scritch behind their commanding officer's auditory organs or equivalent. But perhaps the most lasting change was in how species viewed themselves. The pursuit of cold perfection, of evolution beyond need and feeling, had been revealed as a dead end. The new goal was connection, in all its messy, wonderful, complicated glory. On a small colony world at the edge of known space, a human child and a young crystal spider played together in the setting sun. The child had never known a galaxy where interspecies affection was unusual. To them, petting their friend's crystalline carapace was as natural as breathing. My teacher says humans change the galaxy, the crystal spider said, its translation device rendering its chimes into words. That's silly, the child replied, finding the spot that made their friend glow brightest. We just pet things. Everyone can pet things. Not everyone knew they could until you showed them, the spider pointed out. The child considered this, then shrugged. Well, now everyone knows. So we're all the same, right? We all pet each other. And in those simple words lay the truth of humanity's gift to the galaxy. Not superiority, not conquest, not even wisdom. Just the simple, revolutionary idea that every conscious being, regardless of form or evolution, deserved to be touched with kindness. The galaxy had learned to pet, and in learning to pet, it had learned to heal. As the stars came out, countless worlds across the galaxy settled into sleep. Humans and aliens, organic and synthetic, physical and energy-based, all joined in the ancient ritual of bedtime affection. Parents soothed their young with touches adapted to their species. Partners shared comfort in forms their ancestors could never have imagined. Even solitary beings had learned to self-soothe, providing themselves the affection they needed. The universe was vast, cold, and infinite, but in this corner of it, warmed by the simple power of caring touch, life had found a way to make the darkness a little brighter. And it had all started with a human child who looked at a terrifying alien predator and thought, I bet it would like a pat. Sometimes, the smallest gestures create the biggest changes. And sometimes, the greatest power in the universe is the ability to see past the scales, chitin, crystal, or energy fields to the universal truth beneath. Everyone, everywhere, just wants to be loved. The humans had taught the galaxy to pet. But more than that, they had taught the galaxy to care. And the galaxy, in all its magnificent diversity, had learned the lesson well.